I'd like to call the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee for Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is adoption of the agenda. Need a motion to adopt.
Romano adopts the agenda.
Support Van Sickle.
Moved by Romano, supported by Van Sickle. Discussions? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Next item is approval of minutes dated October 17th, 2022. Need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve Van Sickle.
Support Wallace.
Made by Van Sickle, supported by Wallace. Any corrections, commissioners? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Next item is public participation. This is the first opportunity for public participation for those who would like to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on an item which is on today's agenda. There will also be a second opportunity for public participation for those who would like to speak on any issue. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Agenda items only. Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Next is department recommendations. First one here, 6A, is 2022 Macomb County Apportionment report. I need a motion to recommend this to full board.
I'll make the motion.
Made by Farrington, supported by Zinner and Kristen.
Well, good afternoon.
You have the floor.
It's nice to be here. Haven't been here since April. Hope all is well. We're here today for the purpose of approving the apportionment report. General Property Tax Act requires that the County Board of Commissioners approve the apportionment report at this regular session in October each year, and then to direct the various taxing authorities in the county to levy the millage rates included in this report. Each taxing authority files a tax rate request form, and then I process all of those and I list them all in this report for you in a summarized format. The apportionment report summarizes all of these millage rate requests. I don't know if you guys spent any time looking at this report. I know you guys all did last year, so I hope I have all the corrections made from last year. I do want to point out a couple of things. Just the very beginning is something that I started doing a couple of years ago. Gives you an idea from last year to this year, so the first couple pages are that comparison, and then we get right into the summary of the totals: homestead, non-homestead, commercial, personal, and industrial personal. We also got into the school district millage rates, summary of all the millage rates. There's a couple of pie charts, and that is on, if your packet is still the same, on page 20 of your packet, 11 if the report is numbered in your packet. For the pie charts, I'm sorry, page 14 in there. Let's see, I should have put a sticky note on that page. On this, the smart bus is in red because we don't have a smart bus millage right now. It's on the November election. So if it does get passed, then I will revise this report and prepare a new one with that revision. We also have 2 local units, I believe it's just 2, that have a library millage also on the November election, and it is going to be levied on the winter bill. So the only ones that I do revisions for are typically those that are on the election and then will be levied on that December bill. So I just wanted to point that one out. Smart Bus, there's a reason why that one has zeros. It hasn't been approved yet. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward, just all of the amounts listed. We do go into the county total, countywide tax levy, the estimated school district tax levies, the different estimated tax levies for the ISDs, the SET, the Macomb Community College, and then the local units. And then the very last page are special assessments. So those are ones that are not the whole entire local unit or maybe not the town, maybe not the village, just the township. So those are just ones that are smaller portions of a larger taxing authority. And so those are spelled out. And special assessment districts are different from all the rest of these in here in that they are levied against Renaissance zone properties, and typically they are levied only on the real property. And if you guys don't remember what that is, we have personal and real. Real are the buildings and the land. Personal is all the stuff inside it. So the special assessments are levied on real only. And then I will take any questions on the report if there are any.
Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen, thank you and your team for another great report. I know you guys are run efficient over there, and I appreciate that.
I have the best staff in the whole state.
You say that year after year, and I believe it.
It's the truth. It is the truth.
Quick question on the very last, the special assessment taxes.
Yes.
The Village of Armada and Village of New Haven have a highlighted section. Is that just a...
So the highlighted section is one that I have to hand enter in, and so that's my own personal reminder. If I run it without color, then we lose the pretty blue. That's all that is.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Seeing no other speakers, Kristen, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
On the first page, I know obviously we have the Headley rollback. What was the total amount for the Headley rollback?
The total amount for, well, okay, so every taxing authority has a different amount of rollback. So I could provide those for you. They are available on their website, on my website.
Well, let me ask you this. What was the average?
The average, that I don't know, but I could get that for you if you'd like.
Okay, I was just curious.
Mm-hmm.
And then I may or may have never noticed this in the past, but what is the column that represents the extra voted?
What is the column that? Oh, so there are extra voted. So sometimes you have a charter millage. Sometimes there's an extra one. So there's one that's assigned within your designated charter, and then if the local unit decides to add an additional millage to that one that's already specified in the charter. So that's what that is.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. See no other speakers.
Chair, excuse me.
Commissioner Zinner.
On Harrison Township, it says .67, which it is.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. On Harrison Township, you have .67, which it is, but that increases for the next 4 years, I believe, right? So you're just doing this per year?
This is just a straight comparison from last year to this year. This column percent, the rate change, that's just a straight from whatever the total was last year to whatever the total was this year.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, seeing no other speakers. So, please vote. Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome.
Motion passes 11-0.
Okay, next is a change order for Alight Solutions LLC for project contingency funds for $280,000. Need a motion to recommend this to full board. Moved by Nard, supported by Wallace. Steve?
Good afternoon again, everyone. Good to see you. What we're asking for here is authorization to execute a change order to our contract with Alight Solutions in the amount of $280,000. Alight is the implementation partner on the Workday project. And the original contract with Alight includes a contingency of $280,000. What we'd like to do is remove that contingency from the Alight contract, put that money into a contingency account within the project fund, and then be able to utilize that money as needed for other consulting companies to help us through the course of the project, essentially. So we've identified a need, for example, for assistance in the area of data conversion. So we've identified a consulting company called KOA Hills that has experience migrating clients from one solution, our current platform, to Workday. So we could utilize those folks to help us identify or assist IT in extracting data from one solution and converting it into Workday data, I guess, or into the Workday format. So what would happen is we would put that money aside in a contingency account, and then if required, we would come to you for contract approval to spend that money down if it's, falls within the contracting policy.
Commissioner Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, welcome. Question, because it's a little confusing. First time my 2 years something like this has happened. Why didn't we set up this fund to begin with instead of going with Alight to begin with and now having?
We weren't quite sure what we were going to need to do or if we would need outside assistance. We thought, we would get additional assistance possibly from Alight.
Okay, so you didn't know for sure they were going to be the answer.
Right.
So.
And then we were able to identify a company that actually has experience helping clients convert from one solution to Workday.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Steve.
Hi.
So, what is Alight doing? I mean, it seems to me the conversion of data from the old system to the new system is pretty at the heart of what we're trying to do. So now I'm wondering what Alight's doing.
So Alight is involved in taking the data. So IT is taking the data, converting it to Workday format. Then we send files or this information to Alight. They upload it into Workday, and then they help us through things, let's say on the payroll side, writing code for the pay codes and the deduction codes and setting up employee self-service and workflows. They call them business processes, but workflows. They'll do the same thing on the finance side as well. Then they develop testing plans for us and things like that. So they aren't necessarily involved in the data extraction and upload. That's our responsibility.
Okay, so this contingency would help us actually extract the data, and then we give it to Alight, and they do their magic with it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon.
What percentage of a light contract has been fulfilled by them and paid off by us?
I think if you'll look, I don't know off the top of my head. We've started about 5-6 months ago. So our contract is $2.8 million roughly. And if you look on page 39, we've made 3 payments of $132,000. So $500,000 out of $3 million. This project, and you'll hear in my budget presentation, so we go live with payroll and human resources in July of next year. Finance is a year out in October. So there's a lot of work left to do.
Okay, well, in general, a contingency fund is meant to be in case the work gets more complicated, right? And they have to go over their estimate?
To some degree, and in this particular case, what we found is having our staff work with Alight to determine the conversion templates, they call them, is far more work on our staff than we really have time for. So that's what we're using KOA Hills for, is to, or want to use them to help us, because it's very, very time consuming right now. And we simply don't have the resources without working a massive amount of hours.
Well, my point is it'd be one thing if you wanted to reallocate some of the funds we were going to originally spend for Alight to a different vendor, but the contingency funds should have been just that, a contingency, and now it sounds like they're being built into the main plan.
I'm not sure I follow your question. I mean, we
You want to take the contingency funds and go hire other contractors as part of the plan, right?
If we need be, yeah, if need be. And we've identified a need at this point in time. I don't know if we'll spend all $280,000 of it or not. I would hope not, but I don't know that.
So did we do not a real good job of estimating what the scope of work is, that we have to take some of the contingency and go spend it?
I think what we found is that the data conversion process is very much more laborious than we thought.
So the estimate wasn't all that good.
I don't know if I would say it wasn't that good. We were not aware of, I guess if you want to put it that way, I guess I'm not going to try to argue with you, but we didn't know how difficult it was going to be for data conversion.
Was this estimate done in-house, or did we have a contractor do it?
We did it in-house.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Chair.
basically, if you look at it, it's about a 10% contingency. The original contract is just under $2.8 million. So it was a 10% contingency.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Steve, this contingency fund, is this a separate fund, or do we just have a contingency fund with the county that we just?
It'd be in a line item within the project account.
Okay. And then if this isn't spent in the future, then this would be returned back to the general fund if
Yes.
it's not used?
Yeah. So again, this is not increasing the total cost of the project. This is just pulling money out of one bucket, putting it in another in case we need it.
Got it. Okay, seeing no other speakers, please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Okay. So we were just here yesterday doing this. So next item, budget reviews. Steve, it's like you haven't left that podium.
It feels that way.
All right, so I need a motion to receive and file for the budget reviews today for finance, equalization, purchasing, appropriations, non-departmental, operating transfers, and debt service. Support. Made by Farrington, supported by Romano. And Steve, we'll start with finance.
Okay. So I'm here to talk about our 2023 budget, of course, in the finance department. We have 3 people in administration. That's myself, my deputy, Steve Adair, and Valerie, our administrative assistant. Fiscal services, that's your typical traditional accounting function, accounts payable, accounts receivable, preparing for the audit, bank reconciliations, balance sheet account reconciliations, that traditional accounting function. There's 13 folks in there. We have 7 fiscal analysts, 5 administrative support people, and a fiscal services manager, who I will introduce shortly. We have the payroll function, that's your traditional running checks, issuing W-2s, managing garnishments and child support withholding orders, sending bank files and those sorts of things to get employees paid. We have 2 folks in risk management. We have a risk manager who was unable to join us today. You know him, John Anderson, and he has a support person who actually splits their time between risk management and what I call the systems and support services function, which I'll mention in a minute. We have a budget function. There's a senior budget analyst and a budget analyst. One of those positions is currently vacant, as well as one of my fiscal analysts. And then we have systems and support services, which is sort of a jack of all trades position. The person has an accounting background, but they assist in general accounting matters, but their primary focus is supporting the One Solution system. They'll continue that role into Workday, assisting other departments. And then we have what we refer to as the grants division. You heard yesterday where we folded in or absorbed the fiscal team from Community Action and Office of Senior Services. What happened, many of you will remember Gary Cutler. He retired earlier this year, so we had an opportunity to sort of evaluate and examine things, so we thought it would be more efficient and provide some synergy to bring those folks under the umbrella of the finance department, sort of try to centralize things a little bit more. So there are 4 folks in that division, and you'll hear in a few minutes I'm asking for one more fiscal analyst in that particular division to support the accounting and financial reporting and budgeting needs of Ernest's office. As you heard yesterday, many programs between the Office of Senior Services and Ernest at Community Action. There's probably 60 different programs, all have different requirements, and there's basically 4 people in that department today, and it's simply not enough, so we're asking for one person that would be funded through those various grants in those 2 offices. Our budget's about $2.9 million this year. 85% of it is personnel. The next screen is just an org chart of our department, just what I described here. And you'll notice to the far right, there's a new position shaded in green. That's the one I just spoke about to provide and augment the support for the fiscal team over at, well, in my office now, but the team that supports Community Action and Office of Senior Services. So before I talk a little bit more about what's going on in my office, I want to take the opportunity to introduce some key folks in my office. As you know, Steve Adair is my deputy director. John Anderson, I mentioned, the risk manager, unable to join us today. Dave Steitler Jr., you all know Dave. He was promoted this year to the fiscal services manager upon the retirement of Alice Grange. Julia Bingham, you've seen Julia before? She replaced Gary over at Community Action, so she's the fiscal services manager for that group of funds. She's came to us earlier in the spring from Turning Point, so she's doing an outstanding job, as well as my entire staff. I talk about my staff every year. There's 26 of them behind me, and they're all outstanding. Very, very dedicated. A lot of tenure in my office still. I'll talk about turnover a little bit, but a very tenured group in general. We also have Larry Lee, the purchasing manager, and Kristen Seeloff, as you know, the equalization director. I'm going to move on to slide number 5. So what's kind of happening in our office? So, of course, we completed the audit, and we had 2 findings this year. I came to a year ago and said it was all hunky-dory because we had 0 findings. We did have 2 that were not very material necessarily, but we did have 2. Our support division, as I call them, we continue to assist departments in utilizing the Google Smartsheet platform when we can to help out with workflows. And hopefully we get to the point where Workday will handle all these for us. We continue to assist departments when necessary with COVID-related grant reporting. We continue to enroll vendors where we find it advantageous into ACH payments as opposed to cutting them checks. We, again, began the implementation of the Workday platform. And I mentioned turnover a little bit. So my office typically has had a lot of tenure. People come, they stay a lot. You know, Dave's been here 33 or 34 years. I've been here 32. Got a couple people in my office have 35 or 36 years. In 2021, we had 1 person leave. We didn't fill that position due to the pandemic. And then we had another person retire this year, and 2 other folks left for other positions in other departments in the county. So we currently have 3 vacancies, and when you take into account the 4 folks that came over from MCA Finance, we got a lot of new faces in our department, which is not a bad thing, different perspectives and things of that nature, but we do have more turnover in the last year than probably the last 15 years combined, I would say. Just a lot of new faces, but it's a good thing. We've had a little bit of difficulty filling positions. You've heard that over and over from other departments. The 3 vacancies we do have are currently posted. We hope to have those filled soon. Coming up and looking into 2023, of course, we always hope to complete the audit with no findings, but our main goal is to fill our vacancies, get our positions trained up, our new employees trained up, I should say, complete the Workday platform so we can become more efficient going forward into 2024. And again, we're asking for 1 fiscal analyst to support the financial accounting needs over at OSS and MCA. That position is about $98,000 all in with benefits. The last slide I'll talk about is just a snapshot of our budget. And you'll see to the far right, our budget on paper is going up about 24%. That's primarily because we're rolling in $500,000 of payroll costs that was previously accounted for over in community action. And you'll see that in the revenue line. If you look to the left-hand side of this schedule, you'll see if that had not happened and everything was status quo, our budget would be going up about 6.7% overall. The majority of that would be increases in personnel costs, which, as you've heard from other departments, is mainly the effect of implementing the new PTA wage schedule. So with that, I'll be more than happy to take questions.
85% of your budget is personnel. I mean,
because we don't have very much operating. What I mean,
I was looking at
$50,000 or $60,000. 40, 60, 62,000.
That's still commendable. I do have a question though. And you've sat here as much as we have in the last couple of weeks. It seems everybody that comes to that podium, every department, is looking for assistance in writing grants. And you have 4 people in the grant division. I understand that some of these grants are specialized and need a certain amount of experience. Do you assist these other departments with your 4 people in writing grants?
The 4 folks that are we call them the MCA team still, but they support the MCA function. Those 4 folks will assist in writing the grants for the MCA grants. So what we typically do if another department is seeking out a grant, we'll provide financial information relative to personnel costs, typically, is what we do.
Like MSU Extension, you heard them yesterday. We need a lot of help. We may need another clerical person to help write grants. And I'm thinking, we've got to have that expertise internally somewhere.
We do. We, again, provide mostly the financial side of it. You heard Vicki talk about adding a grant manager in Health and Community Services that would help, at least in that umbrella of departments, which are, I would venture to say, is the large majority of our grants.
So we'll use Vicki as an example. Does she utilize your 4 grant people to assist with those, or does she virtually do it under her control?
I would envision that if that position were added to her off to Health and Community Services, that position would complete the application in terms of verbiage and write-up and justification for attaining the money. We would again provide the numbers behind mainly personnel.
Okay. And do you have a number of how, I may be here somewhere, of that dollar amount of grants Macomb County receives annually anywhere?
That would be primarily in the single audit for the federal money, and then the state money, we can get it. I don't know. Steve, do you know roughly on the federal side?
Non-COVID, you're usually around 70 of federal.
Yeah, so about 70 million in pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
On federal grants. We get a lot of state grants too.
Right.
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, help me with something I'm a little confused on. On your supplemental number 2, says the 2022 goal was Audit Department, but we did not approve it. I do remember us approving 1 auditor, I believe. So
the financial under number
2 under goals for 2022.
So
status of the goals.
So under goals, number 2.
Yeah, it says we didn't approve the initiative. My memory could be wrong, but I could swear we approved 1 of the 2 positions.
What we did, I'm trying to find where you're at, Commissioner. I'm having to.
On your supplemental.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm just not seeing under goals.
You got 3-year outlook and status of 2022 goals.
Oh, status of 20. I'm sorry.
Number
you're down
2.
at the bottom. I'm sorry. So what happened there? is, and this may be a little confusing, I'll say maybe, is the board was gracious enough to authorize us for a fiscal analyst and a fiscal information systems manager, upgrade from a part-time to a full-time. What we ended up doing was having difficulty finding candidates for the fiscal information systems manager, and we filled an additional fiscal analyst, basically.
Okay, so that's something you did internally, but we did approve the role of an auditor, correct?
Right, but we asked for 2 auditors, and we were given basically 1 a year ago.
So this is basically incorrect, because it says we didn't approve the initiative. Just because you changed the initiative after the fact, it wasn't us that didn't approve it. I just wanted that noted.
Yeah,
I just wanted that
incomplete
noted.
in the sense that we asked for 2.5 positions and we got 1.5. If you want to look at it, you were gracious enough to give us the 1.5. We very much appreciate it.
I mean, I get it, because I was ready to approve the second one this year, and I saw it, and I'm like, okay, now you don't even have the initiative, even though, you know. So I was taken aback the fact that it says we didn't approve it when we actually did approve the audit position. So
duly noted.
Thank you.
Steve, just stay on that topic. So I know last year's budget cycle, when we had the discussion about the internal auditor position and what you wanted to do, that was primarily related to the findings that we had in that previous year audit. And
yeah, we were going to try to stand up an audit division again. We used to have one in the finance department when I first hired in. That's the division I hired into years and years ago. You know, over time it was dissolved basically through the Great Recession and so on. We tried to want to stand that up. What we're finding is we have more need for fiscal analysts now with all the various grant reporting requirements.
So are you saying that we are no longer in need of an internal auditor?
I wouldn't say that, but we are in need of more fiscal analysts, and there are financial constraints, you know, on the budget.
Okay.
I wouldn't say we wouldn't need fiscal or auditors, but there are pros and cons and balancing act going on.
So the MCA reimbursable, so the one position that you're looking for, that's going to be reimbursed? That's
built into the revenue stream there, yes.
So that's not a general fund related item theoretically, right? Because it's going to be reimbursed back to you.
Right, correct.
So charges for services is probably the only department I've seen so far that actually increased their charges for services.
Well, that's because of the MCA.
And that's primarily because of that?
Yes.
Okay. So how are we doing it before that? In 2022, or in this year, I should say, you have 4 positions that are reimbursable, but you only got $4,000.
So we haven't amended the 2022 budget. We just started charging those folks on 10/1. So we have enough money in our budget for the remainder of the year through other vacancies to pay for it. So we haven't amended the 2022 budget yet.
Okay. Makes sense. Commissioner Farrington, round 2.
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking, so basically in a couple of years when the federal funding decreases, it would probably make sense, and I believe knowing the skill set, you could move a couple of those analysts over to a new audit department role, correct? If that happens
and there's no longer a need for, of course, all the major influx of all the federal funding relative to COVID will dissipate, but there are still a lot of programs over at Community Action, primarily for home delivered meals, or that's OSS now, but Head Start and the food program. And
so long term, you don't see a large dissipation of the federal funding?
No, I think there's an increase in need going forward permanently, and some pressures to get through all the reporting on the existing COVID grants.
Okay, thank you.
But it's possible.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Haw.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I had talked to you briefly about this prior to the meeting. How much time is dedicated to monitoring ARPA funds being spent correctly?
The ARPA funds really haven't been spent yet at this point, so most of that is in the planning stages. Going forward, depending on what's approved and so on and so forth, there could be quite a bit going on with monitoring contract submissions and labor requirements and things like that. Everything's in the planning stage at this point. So my office isn't necessarily involved in monitoring compliance with the spending at this point because there's not any spending.
So when the spending starts, that responsibility would fall on your office?
Yes.
Okay.
A combination of my office and the exec's office, but primarily on my office.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Brown?
Thank you. On that question, Steve, regarding the ARPA funding, Michigan Association of Counties contracted a blanket consulting contract with Guidehouse to advise counties, not only here in the state of Michigan, but across the country, on ARPA funding. They're experts on how those things are to be spent. They're a real resource and asset. They've come here before us earlier this year and gave us an overview of the general buckets that the money can be spent in. But they can get down in the weeds. Many counties across the state have actually contracted with them to ensure that they're complying legally with the intricacies and changing regulations regarding those monies. I'd suggest that maybe we contract with them, either you or us or both, or somehow, it's both of us doing it. We just get one contract for them that'll work with us to help us make sure that when the kind of money comes spent, we got some backup in terms of what we're doing with it. Because unless you have somebody else that you already have that is giving you the expert advice.
Well, I can tell you, as you know, we recently switched audit firms, and UHY is actually working with the city of Detroit and helping them through the spending of their ARPA money. I would probably lean on them first.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd prefer a national company that's done work nationally than, the city of Detroit's not hardly one to be looking at for accountability with finances, right?
I think that's why they were looking toward UHY for some
bring
expertise.
a professional firm in. And you had noticed UHY's top notch, there's no doubt about it. So anyway, I just tossed it out there as a thought that it might be a resource for us for a backup, and I don't know what it would cost, and I'm going to do an inquiry and I'll share it with you, and so we can see what's available, and just so we all are on the same playing field, so we all know what the rules are, because no one wants to get in trouble, obviously. So, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The mention of the new audit company that we hired is what I wanted to ask about. Obviously, your department and the old audit firm have been working like a well-oiled machine over the past few years. We now have a new audit company, which is there's gonna be a learning curve and figuring out how y'all work together and how they like their information and how you provide do we have the capacity within your current staff to do that?
Yeah, I believe we do. The first year will be the biggest hurdle to get over. We've had at least one meeting with them so far, and the first year in any change like that is
right. That coupled with
hurdle.
The fact that we're changing our whole accounting system.
It's a hurdle, but we'll get through it.
All right. I just wanted to make sure we're covered with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, we're going to move on here to equalization. It's budget page C31, Commissioners.
Hello again. So I just want to say again that I have the best staff in the state, and I thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to keep that staff at that high of a level. Equalization runs pretty lean. We have 10 people. Our operational costs are about 2%. Internal services are 18%, and then the rest is personnel. For the third largest county in the state, we are the smallest staff. So, but I will put them up against anybody. So some of the things that I wanted to point out, and maybe you'll remember when we discussed this back in April, we had a new reporting platform, MEG, Michigan Equalization Gateway from the state, that kind of threw a monkey wrench in the works for all of us. We had to quickly change from a Excel-based reporting platform into this combined database, which Macomb County Equalization has never had before. We had 2 months to put it together and then start producing reports and printing them out. And we did that, and it's because of the staff that I have helping me with that. We're top-heavy, though. While we have a great staff, 10 people total, we have 3 managers and we have 7 support. To me, that's a little bit top-heavy. And so in my metric pages that I provided to you guys, the supplemental pages, you'll see one of my future goals is to create a slightly more modernized hierarchy to help facilitate that new reporting process. And it's a lot of review. It's a lot of reviewing the reports, running the reports that we never did before. I did all of the reports. I checked all the reports, and it's physically impossible for me to do that all by myself. So buried in the pages of all those documents is the request for a future deputy. I'm changing, like I said, I'm changing the hierarchy of my department, and through the natural attrition, I'm going to be needing that person. I have an appraiser doing that for me right now. She doesn't have the necessary certification that I'm going to require for that future deputy spot. So she's just, she's doing it for me, but that's kind of her thing. She's the best thing that ever happened to my department, to be quite honest. So I'm going to keep telling you guys about how great my staff is, and I'm going to keep making sure that you're aware, we do this on behalf of you. You're charged with this in the state statute, and then you're also charged to create a department to do this and a director to direct those people to do it. And so I'm going to come to you and request a different hierarchy, but the beautiful part about that is in the end, it's going to cost you less money in personnel costs, right? So I'm hopeful that you will be on board with that as I come to you each year and explain how we're going to transition. One of the challenges for me is everybody's resistant to change. We've always done it this way, and that's one of the worst things that you can ever say to me. We used to shake Polaroid pictures and stick that on a piece of paper and call it a record card. We don't do that anymore. We have a beautiful pivot point program that this county won an award for this year, the implementation of pivot point. My staff does everything on a tablet out in the field, and they press a button and it goes into the big wide world, and then they go back to their desk and they hit a button and it comes in. They're 2 to 3 times faster, and like I said, they're very adaptive. We went from old-fashioned measuring to this brand new program, and it was just a wonderful thing. So the problem for me, though, is with all of that wonderfulness, sometime in the next 3 years, I'm going to have between 30 and 40% turnover. So, that's my other challenge, my resistance to change, getting them on board to this new technology, getting everybody excited about this new technology, getting everybody trained up on it, and then they leave. So I'm the 3rd youngest in my department, believe that. So we're in a position of transitioning. 30 to 40 could be as high as 50. I'm going to be around for a little bit, though, as long as you guys want to keep me. So, and the other thing I wanted to point out, the revenue sheet, the revenue column on mine. So that's a wonderful new thing. We never were able to really generate any kind of revenues. This combined database capacity that we have now enables us to just download a lot of information to people, and they can receive it on their end, and we're charging the right amount of money for it. We estimate $7,000 each year as our revenues, but we've exceeded that. This year we're at $21,000 already, and I wasn't sure. The pandemic was like a weird year. We'd never got $28,000 before, and so I never want to keep estimating higher. Because that was just a strange situation. And then 14, it dropped a little bit. So I'm like, all right, we'll just keep it at 7, guarantee them 7. And this year we got back up to 21. So that's pretty good. And it's because we're able to give them that information a little bit more readily and in a better format. And then right now, we're actually working with the planning GIS people to give them some historical data, some mapping, mapping of our historical data, the assessments, all that kind of stuff. And my person that helps me with all that I do, she's working very diligently with that staff to come up with some historical layers of information that can actually be mapped. So some exciting things with this technology and this forced CAMA data standard requirement by the state. So I knocked them a lot in the beginning. If any of you are listening from Lansing, my apologies. It has really helped us provide better information for you all, for all of the other county departments, and for our residents and taxpayers. And so with that, I'll answer any questions.
Commissioner Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Kristen, great job as always. I guess I want to hear a little bit more about this hierarchical change, because when I see 2024 and 2025, it still has 3 managers and 7 professional staff.
Right. So in 24 and 25, the position is being introduced. It's going to be introduced to you because I have one person that has been on the DROP program for a while. She swears she's never leaving. Well, that's fine. I mean, stay as long as you want, but it's always there. The other manager has already given me a tentative date of December.
So is it
25.
the concept that when one of the higher level people leave, you're going to add 2 lower level?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement that deputy, and then when the second one goes, it's going to become an appraiser.
Okay. So it'll be more at 2 and 8.
Right,
Okay.
right. And then the other thing I didn't mention too, the clerk's office has been absolutely wonderful with the Register of Deeds. They are like a couple days behind. People drop off their deeds to be recorded. They're a couple days behind. And so I have 3 clerical entering deeds. Well, I don't necessarily need 3 clerical entering deeds. However, I would love to have a residential and an agricultural appraiser, which is a step down from the commercial appraiser. So that's what I mean by this hierarchy.
Okay.
I want more
Is there a
boots on
reason
the
you
ground.
didn't put that in the projections for 24 and 25? Because if we're going to have a 3-year lookout, we might as well, and you're not the first department to do this. It's kind of an irritant of mine is everyone's just flatlining the next couple of years, basically, which doesn't mean it's really a 3-year budget.
So right now, the anticipation is the top people, I'm only going to lose 1 at the end of 25. This is a 23, 24,
you're
25.
beyond that.
Right, I am just planting
Forward
the seeds.
looking.
I am planting the seeds.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay. Kristen, no other questions for your department, so you're all set.
Thank you.
Next is purchasing. This is budget pages C52 and C53. And Larry, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Again, I am not as exciting as equalization or finance. I think I have 4 changes, 2 of them relatively large, and 2 that aren't all that exciting. One of the biggest ones is I'm requesting a part-time position for our print shop. The second one is a budget increase for next year to purchase a new delivery vehicle to replace a delivery vehicle in our central receiving. And that's just because, as we've talked before, I don't know when we're going to be able to actually buy that vehicle, so might as well come now and get that money allocated for it next year. And the other 2 are a $400 increase for cell phones and a $4,000 increase for repair and maintenance for our archives to replace 2 adders. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Hey, Larry.
How's it going, Commissioner 17?
Good. I'm looking here for speakers. I don't see any. So I actually had one quick question. So when I looked at your numbers for a couple years ago, you had about $146,000 that wasn't spent in your budget, which actually, looking at it, is pretty good based on your total budget for that year on the audited financials. But in regards to the print shop, so what's the strategy there? I know we were having some challenges getting our budgets printed. Is this kind of the the fix-all to that?
Yeah, and I believe that actually goes with the variance a couple years ago. We actually have had the print shop unstaffed since the beginning of 2021. My buyer for the year of 2021, we actually promoted him from the print shop. He then became my buyer, and then he kind of did double duty because we were still kind of shut down from pandemic. We weren't doing as much print, so it wasn't feasible to put a full-time staff in there. So with that, in April, May of 2022, we finally staffed that open position. She is now trained and starting to do a little bit more. And with perfect example is not being able to get the budgets printed in time. She was on her honeymoon, so our print shop was left vacant that week. The reason we're wanting to do a part-time position is, though I would love to say hire 10 people in that print shop, just capability. I mean, we only have so many printers. We can only print so many at one time. Having a part-time position, A, will be able to cover when our full-time printer is on vacation, and then B, just to help with clerical and getting things out so we can actually increase some of our print jobs throughout the year.
Okay. See, no questions. You're getting off pretty easy, Larry.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
You should be smiling. All right. Next is appropriations. Budget page C64.
I'm going to skip the PowerPoint next year. It seemed to work quite well, actually, for Larry.
You overthink it, Steve.
Oh, yeah, I overthought it, exactly. I think Commissioner Romano has reminded me a few times that maybe sometimes more or less is more. Anyway, so we are on page C64. I'll make a few brief comments and then take questions that you have. Again, this is the area of the budget where we put in most of the memberships. As you'll see in the upper section of the page, basically repeats of prior years. You will notice about 3/4 of the way down that list, the one Macomb allocation went from 30,000 to 0. As Vicki talked about yesterday, that money's been moved into Health and Community Services. The lower section are various other expenses that are kind of a general non-departmental in nature, the annual audit. There's a county at-large drain, that's a 50-50 match for drain clean out between the Public Works Department and local units. There's a maintenance fee that we have to pay on the county's portion of the expenses at the 8.5 mile pump station, a couple $100,000 for countywide professional development that's really managed by HR, and one-time $100,000 allocation to Public Works at the request of Commissioner Miller for some Clinton River cleanup. I'm sure her or Brian Baker will speak to that when they're here before you next week. We've also continued a little bit of a somewhat of a COVID contingency of $850,000. We still incur some costs here or there. We're very hopeful that we don't spend anywhere near that amount of money. So I'll take any questions you may have on C64.
Steve, in regards to the appropriations for the outside agencies and associations, so who are these allocated specifically to these departments? Besides the one Macomb, obviously that was moved out, but are these just generalized for everybody?
Typically, yeah, it's basically across the county.
Okay. In the appropriations, the other, like you're talking in regards to like the county drain, the drain clean out, the match there, that's not specifically put in the Public Works budget. It's held separately here.
It's held separately, just to identify it as a general, not specific to that department.
Okay.
We've had that county at-large drain particularly was in the budget for years and years, and it sort of went away. Now we've added it back the last couple of years. Again, Commissioner Miller is asking for some cleanup money for the Clinton River. I'm not exactly sure which branches or anything of that nature, but.
Can you talk about the advertising for the more than a job?
That was, I think Carlin mentioned that during her presentation. I think she said it wasn't in her budget, it's somewhere else. This is where it's at. It's here because it's not specific to a function of, I don't consider it a function of her department, it's generalized. As you recall, there were employees from various departments, commenting on what it's like to work and be an employee of the county. So we're kind of considering it a general type of thing.
And I remember her talking about this. I just didn't know that this is an initiative for 3 years, or is just a one-time advertising for this?
At this point, I understand it's going to be an ongoing thing. The idea is to get people interested in working here at the county. So it may go away. That's if we are successful in filling our positions on a more regular basis. My anticipation it might be a ongoing expense to keep people keep the county attractive to the workforce.
Okay. Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I'm looking at this, I'm going down to appropriations other, and I'm going down to, I guess, 5-line item, bank fee expense that wasn't charged in 2021. We picked it up in 22 for $90,000, and now it continues. What exactly are bank fee expense?
So what we have there is we pay bank fees, but we don't get charged for it. It's all part of the...
we pay for it, but we don't get charged for it. Okay, go ahead.
So we have a compensating balance with the bank. We earn interest on money, and then they offset that with bank fees. We don't pay the bank anything. So we're grossing up revenue and we're grossing up expense. Is what you don't see it. It's part of the interest. The interest side of it is in the interest revenue. So part of that $6.5 million is $90,000 of interest on this compensating balance.
Well, you just double talked me.
I know
that. You just double talked me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the same question. You maintain an account with the bank, at least I do, or some other people do, and there's a certain amount. They don't charge any fees because of the amount that you, and I know we have a ton. Why do we show this if in fact they're not charging it? And then I try one more time, Steve, and make it a little more plainer to me. I don't understand it.
Let me see if I can try it one more time in a different way.
Are they charging us $90,000 in fees?
They are charging us.
We're not paying. That's a yes answer.
They're not We're not paying them $90,000 in cash. They are charging us on the bank statement $90,000. Correct, Steve? Maybe you can have a better shot at it than me. It's a reduction in interest expense.
Yeah, the interest or the expenses are being incurred. We're not paying them with cash, but we are effectively paying them by having a minimum balance with the bank. And in exchange for that, they give us a credited interest, which offsets it, so they never actually bill us or take the money out of our account. It's just an offset. But in accounting rules, it's just like in-kind revenues and expenses, which are donations. We still book those on our books.
So I'm going to simplify this, make sure that I do understand it. So my wife maintains X number of dollars in a checking account. She goes to order her monthly statements, which normally they would charge $12 or $15, is offset by the balance that she has in her account, so they don't actually not paying it. Simplified?
What we're really talking about is a commercial banking world. Yeah.
Is it on the same basis?
Run it by me one more time.
All right, so when she gets her statements, there's usually a charge for statements from your bank, right? But if you maintain a certain balance in your account, they show it as a charge to you. And then if you maintain a certain amount in the account, they also show the charge being taken away because of the balance that you maintain in your account.
The simple version of it, sure.
Okay, sure. I got it. Thanks, Chair.
Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, the care house appropriation for $25,000 that's been flat over the years, do you know exactly what that goes towards? And don't just say care house.
We've had a contract with care house to provide a nurse for counseling and things over
Okay.
there. It's been in place for years.
Okay, that's what I was curious, because I didn't think we could give to, organizations for, just.
No, we have a contract.
Okay.
We have a written
And then
contract.
Secondly, I think I sort of understand the more than a job advertising item. This is, where I'm going to spin off with this, make Macomb your home. More than a job sounds very similar to work at Macomb County. Just like make Macomb your home is very similar to live in Macomb County. I mean, that both of those seem to touch every aspect of county government, whether it be I'm trying to find a job in the sheriff's department or in finance and things like that. But it's listed in here, but make Macomb your home is somewhere else. Why isn't advertising make Macomb your home an item in appropriations other?
I think that's more specific to the planning department in their initiatives. I mean,
but this could be HRLR because they're the
It
ones
could.
promoting this program. I just don't understand the difference. Why one is in here and one is not.
we're trying to highlight this as a new initiative for one thing.
Okay.
And it's an important initiative.
Sure.
So we're trying to highlight it here versus putting it in HR. And
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Brown.
I'll pass.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, now I'm really confused. So the appropriations outside agencies and associations, those are not outright contributions. This is
mostly memberships. Or in the case of Care House, we have a contract. We have a contract with the Library for the Blind, for example. SEMCOG is a membership. NACO, MAC, those are all memberships.
Turning Point, I'm assuming, are the nurses.
Correct. We have a contract with
Right.
Turning Point as well.
Stream gauge?
I get confused with stream gauge. We have to, that is measuring rainfall on the river and how much it takes to raise the river. We pay this every year to Michigan State now, I think. Used to pay it to the
So
US
this is
Geological Society.
So this is monitoring river levels.
River flow and.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
We talked about that one. The Clinton River Watershed Council, which is a fine thing, which I also belong to, but I'm wondering.
I think it's just a membership we've had for decades. I think we've had that for a long time.
All right. Do we ever look at these and see what it is we're getting for our membership? That's a rhetorical question, because obviously none of these are ours, but apparently our decision. But I would just be, we've given the same amount year after year after year after year, and we're projecting it out for another 3 years. Might be nice at some point to actually evaluate the organizations, what they're doing, what the purpose of our money is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great question, Commissioner, and I think maybe this is something that we, the specific chairs to these different committees, maybe they want to bring these entities here in front of us so we can ask those questions so that we're not hit with it.
You've done that in the past, Commissioner.
So, Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, the Detroit Regional Chamber is new 2022. I don't recall ever hearing anything about them.
You'll probably hear about that when Vicki has not been here yet, has she?
No.
Vicki Rowinski from Planning. So I would defer to
Okay.
her presentation.
And has anybody ever, I don't know, would the Macomb Chamber of Commerce be anything that would be appropriate for us to join or participate in?
I would defer that question to Vicki as well.
Thank you. I will. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Steve, couple questions. I know last year the drain cleaning, we doubled that budget because it's a 50-50 match with the locals. So did that not go to, I thought it was 200, or are we just putting our portion in here?
We are at county at-large drains. If I look at that, I think that should be 200,000 actually, Commissioner.
Okay.
And then the revenue would be another 50,000.
Yeah,
So
unless,
go up
I mean, we
100
can
and-
ask the Public Works
yeah.
Commissioner as well.
Yeah,
Maybe
I believe that.
they put in
If I
the
look at that, that
Clinton River
looks
cleanup.
incorrect. I think it was
because-
200,000.
Yeah. And then circling back to the audit. So on the audit, the non-departmental appropriations variance was $1.6 million. Is that specific to these appropriations, or is that specific to the next item we're about to talk to, which is non-departmental?
It is specific to what we're going to talk about next.
Okay.
So the non-departmental includes everything on page C64, as well as capital outlay, which is the contribution to the capital improvement fund for various projects, plus vehicle purchases and furniture purchases.
Okay.
So I don't know off the top of my head what the variance necessarily relates to among those two line items.
Okay.
Because if you look at C62, the personnel is the turnover factor we've talked about in the past years. That's the 3%. So we spread that to other departments at the end of the year when we prepare for the audit. So there shouldn't be a variance in that line item. It's going to be a variance in the supplies and services line item or capital outlay. Some combination of the two. I just don't know as I stand here.
Okay.
But I can follow up with you if you would like.
That'd be great. And then the Capitan maintenance, is that also Public Works?
That is
Yes.
Public Works. So we have the county has 4 or 5% of the cost of operating the Chappaqua pump station, and we charge whatever's in there, in that cost center, in the general fund, in the Public Works Department, back to the 8.5 mile drainage district.
Okay.
We put this fee here so we don't double bill them, basically, is the idea.
Okay. Commissioner Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that subject, Public Works got a couple things. They got Chappaqua, they got the Clinton River clean out in there. Shouldn't those just be nested in the Public Works office if that's what they're going to be doing all the time?
Again, we're trying to highlight these as a general expense, trying to highlight them. And again, we're trying not to put something, say, in the Chappaqua pump station or the wastewater district, because we can't bill it back to them.
I understand that. But like the cleanup of the Clinton River, I mean, that's an ongoing expense that she's going to do.
Here it's scheduled to be a 1-year expense.
But that job has to be done all the time. That river needs to be cleaned out every time. Every year it needs to be cleaned out. Maybe some years are worse because they don't do it, but that's an annual expense that needs to be done. Just like our lake. Remember we used to have the Lake and River Fund? What was that? You remember that? We used to have the fund to clean out Lake St. Clair when we had all the weed masses out there.
Yeah, from years ago.
Yeah. There's still a problem out there, and I imagine that's going to need to be looked at too. It probably will be before too long. The question is, where do we put those? Do we put those in? Do we create a fund like this to address those special needs that are handled by one particular department, rather than, or do we put it here, or do we put it in that department? I guess
it's a difference in philosophy, I would say, in terms of how you present the budget. I don't know if it.
Well, you're the one that does the budget. I mean, which is the best way to do it from an accounting standpoint?
I think it's better here. It's a one-time expense. It's not going to get billed back somehow incorrectly. And it stands out here. It's a one-time thing. In this particular case, you'll hear Commissioner Miller or Brian Baker, I'm not sure who's going to do the budget presentation next week, will say that cleaning out the Clinton River is not a county responsibility. Well, and she's asking for money to help out the responsible parties for a year. So
Well,
it's
if
not really a
the county,
function.
whose responsibility is it? State of Michigan? State of Michigan's
I
giving
can't-
Oakland County
Yeah,
permission
yeah,
to
they'll
pollute.
explain that. So it's really not a
Yeah.
function of the Public Works Department. It's,
Yeah. But, and then again, but the good thing about having it here though is when they need money for it, they gotta come up to us for a contract for it to spend it out, right? So that's, we can keep, you know, we can keep tabs. That won't be an internal expense of an department. They can.
Yeah, they
they'll
would have to come back if
they
they're
have to
gonna,
pull out,
if they're
as they
gonna-
do everything,
if they're
pretty
gonna
much.
contract with some vendor
Yeah, to do
for over
something.
35,000 to
Yeah,
clean
that's
the
right.
river out, wherever they're gonna do that, they would have to come back for contract approval.
Yep. Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Matuzak, second round.
I actually know the answer to your question, Mr. Chair. Having had a giant tree fall into the Clinton River behind my condo, no one is responsible for cleaning out the river. Not Public Works, not state. I finally found the canoe livery company up in Romeo, who I called, and they came and cleaned out just enough of the tree so canoes can get around. But no one apparently is responsible for cleaning wood out of fallen trees out of the rivers. And so I'm not disappointed to see some Clinton River cleanup in here and the Clinton River watershed and others, because they take some responsibility for the trees that are now, especially the ash trees that have been dead now for a number of years and are falling like matchsticks all over the place. So I just wanted to add this to the conversation because no one is responsible for cleaning out the rivers. It's very frustrating. The big tree is still mostly in the river behind my condo, catching everything that comes down the river when it rains. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Van Sickle.
I don't doubt that Commissioner Matusik found people to tell her that. But when it gets right down to it, isn't every inch of property owned by somebody? So if every inch of property is owned by somebody and the property owner has a tree drop and is causing a problem in the river, I would think, I know, off topic, excuse me, I would think that the property owner would be responsible. But because I'm sure that somebody owns everything. I mean, you can't get away from it. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Steve, one last question on my part here. Which of these items, I'd assume the annual audit, would be wrapped into your indirect cost allocation? Some of these?
Some of these, the audit would be, the maintenance is not, the indirect cost plan costs, probably, the Clinton River clean out, it would not be, advertising would probably be billed back out of this more in a job, would get billed back based on some allocation statistic. The memberships, I don't know right now off the top of my head if the memberships are billed back across the county.
That's fine. The professional development initiative too, that 225, was that a contract that we approved for a number of years?
I believe so. I can't remember the name of the firm.
Okay.
But we did, I'm pretty sure you did. If I had, I can find out what the name of the company is. I just can't remember it right now.
Okay. And then the last question, when I look at the bank fee expense, I know Commissioner Romano dissected that for us pretty in detail today. But I remember a couple years, maybe this was last year, we talked about credit card fees. In each department, we're using a different credit card company to process certain things, and I think the treasurer was taking that over. Is that a question mark for the Treasury, or?
In terms of how that process is going?
Yeah, are we using one credit card provider now for payments, or are we still using multiple?
We're trying to get to that point. We're still using G2G with Oakland County for some services. We're trying to streamline it to go to our primary banking provider. But that would be more of a follow-up with Larry or Joe.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other speakers for appropriations. We are now going to non-departmental, so C62.
So C62 is, again, non-departmental general revenues and expenses. This is the cost center that we record the property tax revenue in. The intergovernmental line item here is made up primarily of revenue sharing, PPT reimbursement, and liquor tax. There's about $400,000 in that line item for the new fee we get for taxes on marijuana dispensaries. We get about $56,000, at least we did this year for the first time, per dispensary. There's 6 of them at this point. So that's what's in the intergovernmental line. Charges for services is primarily real estate transfer tax, interest income we've talked about previously during my overall budget presentation. The indirect cost allocation that's offset by indirect costs charged to the various departments. We just talked about supplies and services, and the capital outlay line item again is made up primarily of 3 things. About $9 million or a little over $9 million in contribution to the capital improvement fund, about $1.4 million, I believe, for vehicle purchases, and about $150,000 for general furniture in various departments. And then the delinquent tax revolving fund has contributed right around $8 million to the general fund for as long as I've been here, so decades.
Commissioner Haw.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, on investment income, 2022, 800,000, 2023, 6.5 million.
So if you remember when I was giving my overall budget presentation, there's a couple of things going on there. As we all know, the Federal Reserve keeps increasing rates. You can get 6-month paper, 1-year paper, close to 3 or 4%. So our current portfolio still has a lot of investments at old lower rates. So as we mature those, we will be receiving receiving higher interest rates on our new investments. Plus, we got our second tranche of ARPA money. So that's another $84 million that we got in August. So we don't plan on spending the entire or much of the $170 million really until 2024. So that's the big increase. It's a combination of more money in the bank plus significantly higher interest rates. You'll see we've tapered off in years 2 and 3 here.
Right.
Assuming that interest rates are going to normalize at some point in time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Steve, the supplies and services, so this year I should say 3.6 million. Next year you're saying 2.5 million. How is that different than the capital outlay? What's the difference there?
So the capital outlay is specific for vehicle purchases, furniture purchases, and contributions to the capital improvement plan. In the supplies and services ties directly to page C64, which are all these memberships and general appropriations. So none of that on C64 is capital in nature.
Okay, and then the capital outlay is the 10 million, the 10.7 there. That's going to relate to the capital improvement fund, the 4.5 million that's on basically the next page.
Eventually, I mean, once we move money out of this line item as projects are approved into a transfer out on page C63, yes. 9 million, little over 9 million of that 10.7 is specific to items on the capital plan.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Hall, you didn't have another question, right? You're still on the screen, okay. System's probably running a little slow here. Okay, we are done with non-departmental. Next is operating transfers, which is the next page, C63.
I'm not really going to say a whole lot about this page in case commissioners have questions. This is a schedule of all the grant funds essentially that the general fund supports. And so we've heard, or you will hear, if you have not already, from the various departments in relative to the contribution that they are receiving from the general fund. So you'll see a lot of them are increasing, somewhat primarily due to changes in wages.
So yesterday, Steve, I know I asked this question, a list of obviously all these funds as far as what we're funding from the general fund, and this would be that list.
That's the list, yes.
So the increase from, I guess, 21 to 22 was 3 million, but from this year to next year is actually a decrease.
Well,
theoretically.
It's theoretically because it's the way that we budget for capital outlay for the capital plan. So you'll see that there's 0 contributions to the capital improvement fund in 2023 because as the budget's adopted, it's all in capital outlay in non-departmental. And then when projects are approved, money moves from the capital outlay line item into the transfers out so we can make the cash transfer.
So you won't know what that balance is until we get closer to the end of the year, correct?
That's correct.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the park fund? $86,000.
That's Freedom Hill. So that's the general fund support required to
for Freedom Hill.
For Freedom Hill.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Seeing no other speakers for operating transfers, next is debt service, F1 and F2.
Again, limited comments on the debt service fund. We're very fortunate that we have really what I think of as one outstanding debt item at this point in time, unrelated to retiree health care. So we have 3 outstanding debt issues, 2 related to retiree health care, 1 related to the renovation of the downtown project or central campus project. We issued those bonds in 2015. They mature in 2030, and this simply lays out the general fund requirement for the principal and interest payments on those that particular debt service payment. The debt service on the retiree healthcare bonds are built into the fringe benefits at the various departments, or in the various departments, pardon me. So I don't really have too much to discuss other than that.
That's
pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Any questions? Seeing none? Okay. We are done with budgets for the day. And we have to vote, that's correct. So please vote. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, Commissioners. Have a good evening.
Motion passes 10-0.
Okay, next item is correspondence. Macomb County bids posted. This is just a motion to receive and file.
Moved by Romano, receive and file.
Support Van Sickle.
Made by Romano, supported by Van Sickle. Seeing no discussion, just please vote.
Motion passes 10-0.
Next item is public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to participate for those who would like to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any issue. Anyone from the public like to speak? Going once, twice. We'll close public participation. Next item is commissioner comments. Not seeing any commissioner comments. Oh, Commissioner Romano, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a mention of the fact that my wife went to church this morning, and she wanted to thank God for being married for me today for 54 years. She was so happy. It's my anniversary. Thank you.
She's a saint before her time.
We all got that message, Commissioner. All right, seeing no other speakers.
Motion to adjourn.
Made by Romano, supported by Nard. Please vote.
Thank you, Joe, for moving these along as best you would.
Motion passes 11 to 0.